Is sustainability an impossible problem? Can we create a world we all want? Can Estonia really become a happier, sustainable nation? Well, I have to admit that the first of those questions is something I've thought about for maybe 20 years, second for about 10, and the last one for about 10 minutes. I only got asked a week ago. I've never been to the Baltic region before. I've been to Sweden, Norway, but never Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. But I'll show you, you're a very interesting country, interesting case statistically. I am a statistician, and apart from being a mouthful of a word, a statistician, it's an interesting job to do. I've tried other things. I've been a psychotherapist, been a management consultant, but I keep coming back to systems. How do we create better systems and big problems? So I find it unavoidable to come back to that. So sustainability. It's an interesting problem. Here is why I think it's an interesting problem. This is a graph showing GDP per capita going vertically, ecological footprint going horizontally, which we've talked about quite a lot recently, speakers talked about earlier. And as you can see there, that's all the nations of the world. It's 143 anyway. And they're spread out on this graph, but pretty much in a straight line. It seems to be that if we think that the progress of a nation is how much GDP it can produce, then sustainability is an impossible problem. Because all we can think about doing to become sustainable is about going back down that line. That we're going to have to somehow give up our quality of life, if we think quality of life is just GDP per capita. No politician can go to the poll and say, I'm going to reduce your quality of life. It's just infeasible to think about that. So it looks very tricky. And your situation looks especially tricky, because there's Estonia. As you can see, you've got a massive ecological footprint and not a very high GDP. It looks like if you're going to create a sort of green growth, that you want to go that way. And that seems to be your challenge, but just to point out to you that no one's done that before. South Korea definitely are trying at the moment. They have very challenging carbon targets, and they are generating innovation and creativity and green growth in that way. So I would send all your economists out to South Korea at the moment. But even if you go there, just to point out that that is the line of sustainability. We talked about one planet living, that's where it is. 2.1 global hectares in ecological footprint. We can critique ecological footprint as a measure, but it's the best international comparison we have about it. It's genius, is managing to create a unit of currency in terms of global hectares that it can compare carbon footprint with the fishes and deforestation and things like that. That's its genius. That's also its statistical weakness when you bring things together into one unit. But that is, it's very easy. You can explain it to your grandmother, which is very, very good. So, this is the organization I work for, New Economics Foundation. We call ourselves NEF. We're based in London. This is our building. It's an old factory. We like to think we're an ideas factory these days rather than producing things. And we have 3 principles that guide our work, and this is really why I've been thinking about sustainability for 20 years. Sustainable development, social justice, so problems of tomorrow, problems of today, and then people's well-being, which is the work I introduced there. And we don't think about people's well-being to have a good time, not that we don't have a good time. We think about it because we think it opens up the other 2 to a fresh way of thinking. So, here's the graph again. If instead of thinking that the aim of a nation is to increase its GDP per capita, we think instead to directly measure people's quality of life, we get a very different graph. It goes like this. It opens up a huge space, a space to breathe, a space to think again. The measure running vertically is a measure called happy life years. There were disability-adjusted life years, and we use a happiness-adjusted life years. It's about quantity of life, length of life in countries, and quality of life. Ask people in big surveys, Gallup do a big world poll, on how satisfied, how happy they feel with their lives. It's qualitative data from surveys. And we adjust life expectancy. We say it's a long life and a happy life that's important. And as you can see, the nations of the world spread out. So we go from there to there. We see different groups of nations down here. Countries that are not producing well-being in any way. Sub-Saharan Africa, typically. Average life expectancy can be as low as 41 years in those countries. We see countries out over here. Yes, the USA is in there. Luxembourg is in there, which isn't really a country. It's part of Belgium, really. And then some of the Arab states, UAE, Kuwait, are up there. Relatively high levels of well-being. Massive ecological footprints. There, on its own, sitting up in the green space. This is an aspirational graph. Costa Rica. And lots of other Latin American countries around there too. Where's Estonia? There you are. You're as big an outlier in the negative as Costa Rica is an outlier in the positive. It's partly why I accepted coming here, actually. You're a very interesting country. We created this, that data's all from something we call the Happy Planet Index. Basically, we're trying to say that the outcome of a nation is to produce great lives for its citizens. That's what it should be aiming to do. And it should try and do that on the least ecological resources it can do. It's a measure of the ecological efficiency of delivering well-being of nations. And we think that's what the future should be. High well-being, low carbon. That's what we need to do. Create a measure that takes us there. You can present it as a table. So running across the top, life satisfaction. That's our measure of happiness, 0 to 10. Life expectancy, how long do people live in a country? Ecological footprint, how much pressure do they put on the planet? Happy Planet Index is it's not quite a division of the first two by the second, but it's roughly that. Costa Rica, top of the bunch. Zimbabwe, bottom of the bunch. USA, which I told you, 114th out of 143. You can see the USA's massive ecological footprint there, 9.4 global hectares. So you can come bottom of the index for two different reasons. You can have high well-being, high footprint, that puts you near the bottom. You can have very low well-being, high footprint. Low footprint, that puts you near the bottom. Zimbabwe is the case in point there. So how does Estonia do in this way, where you have this interesting thing of pretty high footprint, pretty medium well-being? You do pretty badly. And that isn't a factor of your region, because here are the other nations in the Baltic region. Sweden, high well-being, quite high footprint. Finland, high well-being, quite high footprint, similar to Sweden, really. It says here that the Finns are slightly happier than the Swedes. I don't know. It's not a very big effect when you get to the decimal point of that. Poland, medium life expectancy, medium happiness, medium footprint. Lithuania, look at Lithuania's footprint compared to yours. Half of your footprint, same levels of well-being. I know it's to do with the shale oil, things like that. Something you've got to face as a country. Latvia, low well-being, medium thing. So you can create a sort of Baltic comparison here, if you want. I don't know whether you include Norway in the Baltic region, but anyway, they would be the happiest, the Swedes would live the longest. So the opportunity for Estonia, if we put the positive spin on it, is to move across here. You can't become Costa Rican overnight. Costa Rica, some of the world's largest rainforests per population, beaches on both the Pacific and the Caribbean coast, real strong sense of community. Only 2/3 of the GDP, by the way, of Estonia. But they live much longer, 78 years, live longer than people in the USA. They have problems, for sure. They have rising inequalities, they have rising crime. When I went to Costa Rica, they treated the fact that they were the happiest nation on the planet with a huge amount of skepticism, which is healthy in my opinion. So you can't become them overnight, but you can learn things from them. They have they're blessed with renewable resources. They have a lot of hydroelectricity, but they abolished the army in 1949. They invested in healthcare and education. They've done lots of great things. Now, if you're going to get to a better future, you've got to understand your well-being. We've all got to understand our well-being. I think that's both the solution, it's the real way of solution. And this is our model of well-being that we created for the UK Government Office of Science. At the bottom of the model are two foundations, which are our external conditions and our personal resources. It's me. Personal resources is us. The external conditions is our circumstances. We are both ourselves and our circumstances. And they come together in how we do in life, how well we function. And we need to be able to explain that some people thrive in very difficult circumstances and some people sink in very benign circumstances. The two things are always going on. Obviously, more people sink in difficult circumstances, more people thrive in benign circumstances. But out of what we do emerges what we feel, our experience of life, the lived experience. Now, it looks like all the energy is flowing up in this graph, but actually there's feedback loops absolutely everywhere. It's a complex dynamic system, energy flowing everywhere. The speaker mentioned Michele Csikszentmihalyi, that's how you say his name, and he talked about flow experiences, about the feeling of being really absorbed in something. It's actually a direct feedback loop to a task. When we're very absorbed and in flow, we're committed to a task and we see it through to completion. But we've got other emotions. Fear makes us run away, notice a danger. Anger is about responding to a violation. Happiness, enthusiasm is about noticing what's out there. It's about opportunities. You don't meet many successful pessimists because they're quite narrow. So the pessimist earlier is great for giving us a danger signal that something's going wrong. And maybe he's more of an optimist than he was letting on because he's looking for solutions too. But it's actually the optimists that are going to find our solutions. And there are things about what we do shape our environment. If you've got someone who's great in your community, it makes it better for everybody. I don't believe in community versus technology. They're both really, really important. Communities are very important. Technology is really important. And we also have feedback loops about from what we feel either expands us. When we feel good, we start to feel better with ourselves. Or when someone says something very critical to us or we feel bad, we shrink. It happens to us at work all the time, doesn't it? We shrink, we go back into work the next day. So governments tend to intervene in this bottom left-hand corner about creating better conditions. It would be ridiculous for governments to try and make us happy directly. That would just be scary. But they do create the conditions, the environment, or they're one of the players that create that. And that's very, very important to think about. And in fact, this diagram is drawn very neatly for the page, but really, the external conditions are all around us. That's us in the middle. We're sitting there with our personal resources, which is our strengths, our talents. You know, I have to keep coming back to the fact that I am an okay statistician. I'm good at interpreting statistics anyway. I now work with many better technical statisticians than me, that's for sure. But, you know, we bring ourselves to this pot. How do we align ourselves with these things? Sometimes it makes us feel we're pressured by the environment, and we sort of shift and we move, and everything gets really jaggedy, and like we feel out of place and out of sync. We're not in the right place, and we're moving. Feedbacks aren't flowing. We're not listening to ourselves. What's happening within us? Everything is out of sorts, and that's before we even add in the fact about whether we want to think about it as biological, the planet, whether we want to think about it as something spiritual, about looking after all of life. Even before we do that, we can feel out of alignment. How do we get ourselves back into alignment? How do we use our talents, our skills, what we bring to the world, to tackle these big, big issues that face us? How do we do that? Well, I think this is what we want to do. We want to somehow align ourselves, feeling in the flow, things good, with the planet, with things. That's the aim. Obviously, somewhat idealistic. But what's an interesting intervention point, I think, is right in the middle here, about what we do every day, daily. And this is another project we did for the Government Office of Science, which was, what are the 5 things that you can do that's going to make you feel happier? And the first of these is connect. So when we started out today by saying hello, that was a connection. It made us feel good instantly, but you may have met some people that you may keep up with afterwards. Who knows? But connect. Our social relationships are absolutely the most important thing for our well-being. It's why Latin America scores so highly compared to, say, the transition countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Their social capital is much stronger. The second one is be active. Fastest way out of a bad mood is to get outside, go for a walk, a bicycle, a run, a ski, whatever it is you do. Doesn't have to be as much as sometimes the health professionals tell you about, 30 minutes of sweaty exercise 3 times a week. Getting out in the fresh air does it pretty well. Teenagers are known this all along. They put the radio on and dance, put the music on and dance. Fastest way out of a bad mood. Take notice. Noticing what's going on around us, whether things are beautiful, noticing what's going on with other people, noticing what's bubbling up from you. A lot of evidence from mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, but it doesn't have to be formal like that. A lot of people go fishing to meditate, in my opinion. They just sit there very stilly. They're not really bothered about catching the fish. Keep learning. Obviously, TEDx events are great for keep learning. I've learned new things today. It's one of the reasons I like coming to them. But basically, how do we keep learning? How do we learn throughout the whole life course? Not just in school. It's about curiosity, not about knowledge stuffing. And finally, it's about give. Giving is great for our well-being. Evolution is fantastic. We feel good when we give. And you can do experiments where you give people $100 in the morning, half of them go and spend it on themselves, that's retail therapy. Half of them go and spend it on other people, that's generosity therapy. Generosity therapy works much better. They feel much happier at the end of the day. And we need to do all of these things in a way that don't cost the earth. And I just put it to you that those 5 things do not have a high carbon content. There's a possibility space here that we can actually get happier and shed our carbon chains. And that's what I think we should be trying to do. So, is sustainability an impossible problem? No. Can we create a world we all want? Maybe. Can Estonia become a happy, sustainable nation? That's up to you. Thank you.